Lü Pi-cheng was born in the 9th year of the Kuang-hsü reign, 1883, and passed away on 24th January in the 32nd year of the Republic, 1943. This year is her 80th death anniversary. In the 17th year of the Republic, 1928, Lü Pi-cheng, at the age of 46, propositioned to form an animal protection society in China. She wrote an article to broach this. Its first paragraph reads, "In my youthful years while living in Tientsin, I read about the Vegetarian Hygiene Society formed by Wu Tingfang in a Shanghai newspaper. I immediately wrote to assert that hygiene was by nature self-serving. One should declare that abstinence from killing animals was to propagate the principles of benevolence and leniency. Mr. Wu replied in his letter. This was the original idea. However, there was concern that common folks would denounce this as Buddhist superstition. Therefore, hygiene was used as a pretext to facilitate its advocacy. I have been embroiled in the trials and tribulations of life for years. A number of times, my plans were put to an end. Yet, my ideal has never budged. In the winter of Wu Zhen year 1928, during my idle sojourn in Switzerland, I came across a letter from the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the Times newspaper. My heart fluttered with excitement, and I immediately wrote them a letter for discussion. Subsequently, I was resolved to propagate my idealism to our countrymen and to give a basic description of the society as reference. Perhaps there will be future collaboration between Chinese and British organizations to build greater clout. Although the current plan is to set up an organization in China, the aspiration is to attain global influence without national constraints." Wu Tingfang, ambassador to the United States, was a vegetarian for many years. In the third year of the Republic, 1914, he published America through the spectacles of an Oriental diplomat in New York. In the chapter Dinners, Banquets, etc., Wu recounted that he introduced vegetarianism to Chinese and Occidentals he encountered, which was inspired by the book The Aristocracy of Health, written by Mary Foote Henderson in 1904. As Lü Pi-cheng recalled writing a letter to Wu Tingfang when she was young, assuming Wu had formed the Vegetarian Hygiene Society in 1904, Lü was just 22. One realized that her compassionate nature was formed early in life. It did not sprout from her Buddhist faith later on during middle age. In August, the 20th year of the Republic, 1931, Lü Pi-cheng published The Light of Europe and America in Shanghai. It chronicled news about the vegetarian movement, the anti-vivisection movement, the animal protection movement, and the Buddhist movement in Europe and America. In the beginning of the book, Lü wrote a list of introductory remarks. One of the remarks reads, "It is customary for charitable books to welcome reprints. Whenever there is intention to reprint a book for wider circulation, it is permitted by the author at all time. The person can contact the storage of the printing plates for less effort, or print it in finer details and larger format, whatever are the wishes." Pi-cheng regarded the Light of Europe and America to be a charitable act. Not only did she relinquish her copyright, she was also happy to assist in the printing process. The objective was to proliferate compassion and to convert the ethos of society. Lü was well aware, in order to save the lives of sentient beings, it relied particularly on the incessant implementation of knowledge with action. Further reading the introductory remarks, another remark reads, "Vast quantities of books and magazines on animal protection are published in Europe and America. This book on animal protection resembles the first shot of an arrow in East Asia. Although the first edition is not substantial, it can somehow be a trailblazer. The compassionate and the good can follow to undertake selected translations. Promotion will lead to realization, and resonance will be found with international civilization. We will not let other countries disdain and view us as unprogressive. Such are my sincere hopes." Pi-cheng wished that the Light of Europe and America would be the first shot of an arrow in East Asia, a trailblazer in China. At that time, few Chinese held the notion of animal protection. The tortures and slaughters of animals could be observed everywhere. Even today, 100 years down the road, they resemble destructive and unstoppable torrents. In the West, animal protection organizations were consecutively formed in the 19th century. To cite an example, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was formed in 1824 in London, an occurrence 2 centuries ago. In the classic of poetry, compiled by Confucius, there is a well-known line, "The stone from another mountain can be used to make a abrasive tool." Pi-cheng did not gloss over the use of Western humanitarianism to induce Chinese compassion. The Light of Europe and America introduced Western organizations dedicated to vegetarianism, anti-vivisection, and animal protection for Chinese to refer and emulate. She also translated slogans from the American Vegetarian and Fruitarian Society and the Vegetarian Magazine, an appeal by German, Austrian, Swiss medical opponents to vivisection, speeches and articles by distinguished men and women in the West against the killings of animals. They were intended to arouse Chinese conscience. What were the qualifications of Lü Bichen to write this book? Apart from her proficiency in English, she lived in Europe for a long time. She was familiar with the realm of animal protection, and in particular, she fraternized with the officers of such organizations. It was September, in the 9th year of the Republic, 1920, when Lü Bichen first traveled abroad. She was 38 years old and went to the United States to study at Columbia University. She returned to China in the 11th year of the Republic, 1922. 4 years later, in September, the 15th year of the Republic, she traveled to the United States again, aged 44. In April the following year, she visited Europe to tour France, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, Britain, and Germany. From the 17th year of the Republic, 1928 onwards, she settled in Switzerland. In winter, the 22nd year of the Republic, 1933, she returned to China at the age of 51. 5 years later, in the 27th year of the Republic, 1938, she went back to Switzerland, aged 56. After war broke out in Europe, she left for Hong Kong in the 29th year of the Republic, 1940, where she spent her final days. Altogether, Lü Bichen lived abroad for a total of 13 years. During her sojourn in Europe, she corresponded with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the Abattoir Association of Chicago, World League Against Vivisection and for the Protection of Animals, the Vegetarian Society in Britain, the National Vegetarian Society in the United States, Nederlandisch Vereniging tot Bescherming van Dieren in the Netherlands. On 13th May, in the 18th year of the Republic, 1929, the Internationale Tierschutzes Congress invited Lü Bichen to speak at their international conference in Vienna. There were 10 speakers. Lü was placed fourth, but when the third speaker could not attend, she was placed third. She represented China and spoke in English. The speech was simultaneously translated into German and French. The title of the speech was "There Should Be No Slaughter." In Europe and America, Lü Bichen used a number of English names. They were Bichen Li, Alice Bichen Li, and Upasika Chiman. For Lü to intentionally translate her surname as Li, L-E-E, and not the conventional Wade Zhao's translation of Lü, L-U. Not just because Li is a common English surname and name, one may conjecture that the meaning of the word Li, which is shelter from the wind, appears to be far more philosophical and poetic. Upasika is a Sanskrit word. It means a female lay devotee of the Gautama Buddha. Chiman is the phonetic translation of her Buddhist name, tz'u. When she published Xiangguang Lu in the 27th year of the Republic, 1928, the name she used was Bodhisattva Precepts Upasika Chiman Lü Bichen. Lü Bichen excelled in tz'u lyrics. Her talent was recognized by the eminent scholars Fan Zhenxiang, 1846 to 1931, and Yi-sheng, 1858 to 1920. Over 20 years ago, I acquired a set of the collected works of Lü Bicheng, published by Zhonghua Book Company in the 18th year of the Republic, 1929, from the antiquarian bookshop Bai-cheng Tang. I posted it to my father, Mr. Song Xunlun, as a pleasurable read. He wrote a letter in reply. Son Kong, I have finished reading once the collected works of Lü Bicheng from beginning to end. In fact, there is a copy of her anthology of tz'u lyrics, tz'u, in our house. I read it long time ago, but this was the first time I came across her poetry and essays. I feel her poetry and tz'u lyrics are of the highest standard, though her essays pale by comparison. There are too many stacks of embellished words, nor did she understand the rules of classical essays. Nevertheless, this is already so difficult to achieve. A talent like her, whose learnings encompass Chinese and English, was indeed the only female 80 years ago. Looking at the world today, even combining all the males and females together, there is no one to be found. There are many who are proficient in English, but those who are simultaneously proficient in Chinese are truly rare. As she knew English, in her travel writings of Europe and America, the story and origin of each historic site were described in detail. The literary annals of each place were clearly elucidated. She consulted many books in English before writing, and they could be references for future generations. She wrote articles when traveling through different European countries, and she gave a speech on animal protection in front of a few thousand people in Vienna. The contemporary female tz'u poets, such as Shen Zhufen, 1909 to 1977, Zhou Lianxia, 1909 to 2000, and others, do not know English. Many other female writers in Taiwan and Hong Kong do not know classical poetry nor tz'u, and their proficiencies in English are also limited. Her father, Lü Fengqi, tz'u Ruitian, was a handling academician during the Kuang-hsü reign. He was once appointed Provincial Education Commissioner of Shanxi Province. Her eldest sister was Hui Ru. The second eldest sister was Mei Sun. Both excelled in literature. They are called the Three Lu of Huainan. When Yuan Shikai, 1859 to 1916, was Viceroy of Zili, he founded the Beiyang Women's Normal School and invited her to be the head teacher, and later promoted to be the headmistress. She was only 21 years old at that time. In the 9th year of the Republic, 1918, she went abroad to study at Columbia University at her own expense. Soon afterwards, she toured numerous countries in Europe. Her talent and erudition were just too outstanding. She could not meet a suitable partner in her lifetime. By the end, she remained alone and died in Hong Kong in 1943, aged 60. She recited a piece of elegy for herself before passing away. It reads, "Do condole the third daughter for her downfall and downcast. Take heart to dig and bury attainments a lifetime earned. How hasty are these preachings of Dharma and of Sutra. This mortal world I come to visit, just once and not another time. In Taiwan, it is certainly not easy to acquire a book printed in the 18th year of the Republic, 1929, that is clean and fine. Written by Father, 11th October. Mr. Song-Shun-lun subsequently wrote a long inscription on the inside page of the collected works of Lü Bichen, published in the 18th year of the Republic by Zhonghua Book Company. The text is similar to that of the letter. It reads, Miss Lü Bichen from Jingde, Anhui Province, 字顿夫, 号圣英, born in 1883, the 9th year of the Kuang-hsü reign. Her eldest sister was Hui Ru. Her second eldest sister was Mei Sun. They all excelled in literature, thus known as the Three Lu of Huainan. Her father, Feng Qi, was appointed handling bachelor in the 3rd year of the Kuang-hsü reign, and later junior compiler. He was once appointed provincial education commissioner of Shanxi province. When Yuan Sikai was viceroy of Vichili, he founded the Beiyang Women's Normal School and invited her to be the head teacher, and later promoted to be headmistress. She was only 21 years old at the time. After the founding of the Republic of China, Lü Bichen focused on English studies. Hence, in 1920, she went abroad to the United States to attend Columbia University at her own expense. Furthermore, she toured numerous countries in Europe. She gave speeches and published essays on the abstinence from slaughtering animals. In later life, she became ever more devoted to Buddhism. On 24th January 1943, she passed away alone in Hong Kong, aged 60. Before her death, she wrote a piece of elegy for herself. It reads, "Do condole the third daughter for her downfall and downcast. Take heart to dig and bury, attainments a lifetime earned. How hasty are these preachings of Dharma and of Sutra. This mortal world I come to visit, just once and not another time." Acknowledged by Lun. In our house, there's a copy of the first issue of tz'u Xue Ji Kan, seasonal magazine of tz'u studies, edited by Long Yu-sheng, 1902 to 1966, and published in the 24th year of the Republic, 1935. In the section An Anthology of Tz'u by Modern Women, there is a tz'u lyric to the tune Yin Tian-chang by Lü Bichen. Mr. Song-Shun-lun inscribed the upper margin of the page. The characters in this tz'u, le, tuo, he, were all recorded in chapter 16 of tz'u-ling, zhen-yun, the correct rhyme of tz'u. But the other characters in this tz'u, ke, bai, were recorded in chapter 17 instead. Bichen had rhymed incorrectly, ren. This is a copy of the tz'u xue zhen yun, and this is chapter 16 and chapter 17. in number 2, volume 1 of 慈穴 Jikan. The section An Anthology of Tz'u by Modern Women published a tz'u lyric to the tune of He Xinlang by Lü Bicheng. On the upper margin, Mr. Song Xunren inscribed, "Each word has meaning. Comparing this with the other female poets who groan for effect, act like a pitiful worm to make melancholic tune. This is diametrically opposite." Lun. My late friend, Professor Zhang Shou-ping, was one of the 2 finest disciples of Mr. Long Yusen. He collected well over 100 letters written to Mr. Long. They were compiled into Treasured Letters by Modern Tz'u Poets, which was published by the Institute of Chinese Literature and Philosophy, Academia Sinica, in the 94th year of the Republic, 2005. I managed to acquire 3 letters by Lü Bicheng. The first letter was written on 22nd August in the 27th year of the Republic, 1938. The letter reads, "Dear Mr. Yusen, I have respectfully read your letter of 31st July. It is a good thing for Mr. Nie to encourage Buddhist faith. Although nothing has been learned by studying the sutra, it is fitting to start from practical steps. Note, Mr. Nie was Nie Yun Tai, 1880 to 1953, original name Qi Jie, Buddhist name Hui Jie, native of Hsin-an, Hunan province. He attained the Shou-cai degree, cultivated talent, in the 19th year of the Kuang-hsü reign, 1893. Later on, he became a merchant. In his old age, he became a Buddhist and called himself Ju-si, Upasaka. He wrote The Way to Preserve Wealth. To begin, nurture your heart that feels glad to be wary of the world. For life is inundated with sufferings, while happiness resides in Pure Land. Once this choice is made, one will gradually understand. I heard that the old man San Yuan went on a hunger strike and died. I trust you have received news earlier." Note, Old man San Yuan was Chen Sanli, 1853 to 1937, Hall San Yuan, native of Yining, Jiangxi province. His father was Chen Baozhen, 1831 to 1900, governor of Hunan province, an important political reformer. San Yuan was one of the leading poets of his time. When Japan invaded China and occupied Peking, he went on a hunger strike for 5 days and died. Today, we are all enduring humiliation to beg for life. The way to extricate this is to be reborn in Pure Land. When Mrs. He Dong, wife of the Hong Kong tycoon, passed away, many people prayed for her. Note, the name of Mrs. He Dong was Zhang Lianjue, 1875 to 1938, who used the title Ju-si, Upasika. She was a native of Hsin-an, Guangdong province. Mr. Ye Yufu was present at the scene. Mr. Ye claimed in his letter that this was one of the happiest moments in his life. He said he was accompanied by over 100 people. Together, they saw a white light emerging from the feet of the corpse. It swirled round the body and rose. This was evidence of her going to Pure Land. Note, Ye Yufu was also known as Ye Gongzuo, 1881 to 1968, tz'u Yufu, Yuhu, Hall, Hsin-an, native of Fangyu, Guangdong Province. In the 19th year of the Republic, 1920, he was appointed Minister of the Ministry of Transportation. In the 12th year of the Republic, 1923, he was appointed Minister of the Ministry of Finance. He was a Buddhist and used the title Ju-shi, Upasaka. In the 27th year of the Republic, 1938, Pi-cheng published 相关小录. The first chapter is titled The Rebirth of Mrs. He Dong and describes in considerable detail the death of Zhang Lianjue Ju-shi. It says, the wife of Sir He Dong in Hong Kong, Mrs. Zhang Lianjue, was always kind-hearted. Although she was surrounded by luxury, she was a believer in Buddhism. She spent a huge amount to build an East Asian palace-style Buddhist temple in Hong Kong called Donglian Jue Yuan. When she was dying, everyone recited the name of Amitabha Bodhisattva to receive her. Very soon, a red light arose from the soles of her feet. Then it changed into a white light. It swirled around the body and moved upwards. This was described in the letter by Mr. Ye Gongzuo, and he claimed this was witnessed by well over 100 people. I also wrote to one of the supervisors of Donglian Jue Yuan, Miss Ling Lun Zhen, to inquire about the happenings on the day. She too confirmed that she saw this with her own eyes. She further commented that when the corpse was placed in the coffin, the color on the cheeks turned radiant and the face carried a smile. The arms and legs were soft. The head became cold later. These are evidences of her going to Pure Land. At first, He Dong and his children did not believe in Buddhism. Now they are all believers. The daughter-in-law of my late teacher, Mr. Nian Wenhui, Lü Shuyi, is clever as a child and diligently studies Western scholarship. I heard she has now become a nun at Wanhua Mountain in Peking. Her Buddhist name is tz'u. We have always been relatives. Note, Yan Wenhui, original name Yan Fu, 1854 to 1921, tz'u Ji Dao, native of Houguan, Fujian Province. He was a master of translation in late Qing. His translation works include Evolution and Ethics, The Wealth of Nations, and others. We can all claim to belong to the category of intellectuals and not believers of superstition. I feel this world is so inundated with sufferings. To dwell in dejection for too long can be unbearable. Sir, it is pertinent to plan early. Do not resign. It is no longer relevant whether I print my little booklet. Originally, I wished to revise and reprint my translation of the sutra. Hence, I seek your guidance beforehand. Now it is already printed. It is too late. The complete manuscript of Shao-ping has been in Singapore for a long time. The printing contract stipulated that it should be published on 10th February this year. Hence, I assumed it was mailed to you. I have already paid half of the cost to the printer. The remaining half is entrusted to a friend. I have provided your mailing address for my friend to post you. Yet there is no news. The affairs of the world are such, one can only sigh. Lately, I wrote a small English booklet called What Happens After Death. I have sent the manuscript to London for printing, and I am waiting to receive a few copies. I have composed a tz'u lyric to the tune of Shi Man as an epigraph for my anthology of tz'u lyrics. I hereby present it to you to beg for a response tz'u lyric. I have written hastily and wish you well in your literary endeavors. Respectfully yours, Pi-cheng, 22nd August. Has the commercial press reopened for business? I will appreciate if you can kindly tell me. The second letter was written on 16th November in the 27th year of the Republic, 1938. It reads, Dear Yu-sheng, my tz'u companion, in October, I copied and sent you 学会词. I guess you have received it. It would be most welcome if you could explain to Zhao Shuyong on my behalf. Note, Zhao Shuyong, 1898 to 1965, original name Zunyu, was a tz'u poet. I have just received your letter dated 14th October and learned that you are beginning to have faith in Pure Land. I am most happy. I invite you to take an additional step and make a firm resolution. It is best to observe the 5 precepts and to cease eating meat forever. If not, just strictly guard against any killing. In your house, worship the sacred image of Amitabha Bodhisattva. Every day, you should at least chant his sacred name 100 times. This is the moment of life and death in the eye of infinite calamity. Do not hesitate. I have arrived in Europe for over half a year and witnessed all sorts of frightening and heartbreaking happenings. In May, an earthquake took place in the capital of Belgium. I wrote a letter to a female friend who lived there to console her. She replied, It is not earthquake that is frightening, rather the assortment of happenings in the affairs of men that are horrifying to the extreme. These can be regarded as far-sighted words. Note, at noon on 11th June 1938, Belgium was hit by an earthquake with a Richter magnitude of 5. Newspapers at that time reported it to be the largest earthquake in 45 years. There are 16 million Jews in the world, and half of them now live under the conditions of inferno. Many families committed suicides in packs. Have newspapers in Shanghai reported this in detail? Note, this is the only letter by a Chinese I have seen that discussed the German massacre of Jews. Between 9th and 10th September 1938, German Nazi and Schutzstaffel members attacked Jewish properties across Germany and Austria, paving the road to the Holocaust. This is known as the Night of Broken Glass. 6 days after the incident, Lü Bicheng wrote this letter to Long Yusheng. Please look at this world. Can we live here for long? If we do not seek Pure Land, where can we go? The image of Bodhisattva can be bought from Buddhist bookshops. It does not matter whether the picture is fine or crude, It is where the sacred spirit resides. Here is a gift of an image of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva I have painted on a sheet of paper. Note: Lu Tingfang was also a painter of mostly Buddhist subjects. I once saw the image of a painting of Siddhikapha Bodhisattva by Lu in the 63rd issue of the Biannual Journal of Buddhist Studies, published in the 22nd year of the Republic, 1933. This was painted after I finished translating the 2 Buddhist books in Mahayana. It took me 7 days. Note: Lu Tingfang finished translating the 2 Buddhist books in Mahayana in October the 23rd year of the Republic, 1934. It was privately printed in the following year. In the morning of the last day of painting Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, I was astonished to see a lot of sand in the water of my wash basin. The sand rested at the bottom of the basin, and it formed a lotus flower with 10 petals. The number of petals corresponded with the 10 great vows of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. The night before, I chanted the name of Bodhisattva for a long time before going to bed. When I was chanting, I diligently washed my hands. Every time I drank tea or left my seat, I washed my hands once. Every time I washed, I used fresh water. I trusted there was no dirt on my hands. The windows and doors were all closed when I went to bed. No one could enter. Where did the sand come from? It was an extraordinary occurrence. This is the reason I converted to Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. This happened on 18th February. 3 years ago, on 18th February of the Chinese agricultural calendar, the equivalent of 22nd March of the Gregorian calendar, I went to the room of worship after lunch to type the sutra translation for an hour. When I returned to the bedroom, I saw sand in the water at the bottom of the basin, forming the shape of a lotus flower, with a white crane perching on it. Note: this happened in the 24th year of the Republic, 1935. After I completed the translation, I bought some lotus flowers as offerings to Bodhisattva, and there was a pair of hand-shaped lotus petals. Please accept the photograph I have attached with this letter. Note: in Appendix 1 of the 2 Buddhist books in Mahayana, there was a detailed description of the pair of hand-shaped lotus petals that Lu came across in the 23rd year of the Republic, 1934. In Appendix 2, there was also a detailed description of sand inexplicably found in her wash basin, forming a 10-petal lotus flower. A photograph of the pair of hand-shaped lotus petals was illustrated in Appendix 2. While translating the sutra, at one corner of my right eye grew a small lump the size of a corn. I was worried it might become a malignant tumor. I asked my maid with the surname Jian to tie a silk thread and tighten it daily, until one day it easily fell off. I used the microscope to examine it and saw a cyan-colored lotus flower with innumerable long overlapping petals. This microscope was borrowed from the former provincial naval commander, Jiang Xiyuan. He even called his wife to look at it through the microscope. My maid Jian frequently called the lump treasured flesh. I carefully kept it, but eventually lost it on my way to Singapore. The terms lotus hand, lotus eye, and others are all documented in Buddhist literature. 8 years ago, on 17th November, I bought some chrysanthemum flowers to worship Bodhisattva for the first time. I prayed, if I am going to be reborn in Pure Land, I beseech Bodhisattva to give me a sign. That night in my dream, lotus buds were sprouting from the water surface. They were thick and dense. As I inspected them, the scene changed quickly like that in a movie. In the river, there were lattices made of bamboo and wood. 2 rows surfaced slightly, the top protruding from the water like the tracks of trams. I see this in West Lake every time. It is used to define river boundaries. The leaves of the lotuses within the tracks were opened up, each as large as 1 foot. In my dream, I said to myself, who planted the lotus flowers in this road? The pronunciation of the word road was particularly loud. When I woke up, I remembered that I begged for a sign during daytime. This was the reply of Bodhisattva. Clearly, he told me, there's a road for you to reach Lotus Land. It sprouts only today. Every year on this day, I prepare a major celebration. Tomorrow will be this day again. I halted eating meat 2 years earlier. By 25th December this year, it will be exactly 10 years. I am content with vegetables and fruits. I never think of eating meat. I never feel any deprivation. Sir, why don't you try it? It is greatly beneficial to the economy and our morality. This is in particular the fundamental tenet for the follower of Buddhism. For the intention of Bodhisattva is to attain the great compassionate heart. Killing for meat is against the heart of Bodhisattva. The English booklet, What Happens After Death, was published yesterday. I am mailing you for comment. Please tell me when you receive it. I have written eclectically. Please forgive such disrespect. My writing obligations have accumulated like a mountain. There is no Chinese typewriter, so in reality, I don't have spare time to draft. I courteously wish you well in your literary endeavors. Respectfully yours, Pi-cheng, 16th November. My book is enclosed in a green envelope. Lu Pi-cheng became a fervent follower of Buddhism because of the dream on 17th November. This is documented in Chapter 2, The Road to Lotus Land, of Xiangguang-xiao-lu. The passage reads, on the anniversary 1930, the Chinese agricultural calendar date of 17th November, commonly referred to as Amitabha birthday, I bought 3 chrysanthemum flowers as offerings in front of the image of Bodhisattva. I prayed, if I am going to be reborn in Pure Land, I sincerely beg Bodhisattva to give a sign. That night, in my sleep, there were initially many disorderly dreams. During these disorderly dreams, the scene suddenly changed, as if in a movie. The picture cleared. There was a wide stretch of water. Lush matters were seen on the water surface. To examine closer, they were all lotus buds, densely packed. Suddenly, the scene changed again. There were fences or lattices in the water. This should be called duan. It is used to define water boundaries. They can be found in West Lake in Hangzhou City. They ran in parallel, the tops slightly protruding like the tracks of trams. The lotus leaves were wide open in the middle of the tracks. In my dream, I murmured, "Who planted these lotuses in the middle of the road?" The pronunciation of the character road was particularly loud and accentuated. Then I was awakened, abruptly recalling the prayer in daytime. This was no less than Bodhisattva telling me, "There's a road for you to reach Lotus Land. It sprouts only today." The structure of this dream is ingenious. Lotus is a plant grown in water, while road is built with soil and stone. By logic, lotus cannot be planted in a road. However, the road in my dream was located in water, using fences or lattices to divide the water to form a road. Hence, lotuses can be grown there. Not only are the vistas of the dream ingenious, the meanings are fitting, and it was an answer I received on the day. My faith in Pure Land since the day has been unwavering. At the end of the 2 Buddhist books in Mahayana by Pi-cheng, the story of this dream was recounted in the appendix. However, the date of the dream was recorded as 17th November 1931. In Shangguang-xiaolu, it was recorded as 17th November 1930. In this letter, it stated, 8 years ago, 17th November. This can help to clarify the date as 17th November 1931. The third letter was written on 12 September in the 29th year of the Republic, 1940. It reads, "Dear Mr. Yu-sheng, my tz'u companion, for the awkward situation you mentioned in your letter, those who are kind and sincere will be forgiving. Bodhisattva said that human affairs were like dream, illusion, bubble, and shadow. Hence, we do not need to discuss them in great detail. If you profess your devotion to Buddhism, the standpoints of Buddhism are beyond the limitations of human standpoints. What you have lost, you have gained in other way, and nothing can be better than this." A friend talked about this only recently, and I myself hold this view too. I have not tried to console you with empty words. If you can truly become a follower of Buddhism, you can find peace in human affairs, as if you have moved into another world. You can attain infinite benefits in the future. I hope you can resolve it yourself, and do not yield to futile melancholy. If you grant me a letter in return, please send it through Shanghai. It is important. Handwritten, courteously wishing you well in your poetic endeavors. Respectfully yours, Pi-cheng, 12th September. Seal impressions. Treasured and collected by Yu-sheng and treasured and collected by Man-an. Man-an was the pseudonym or hall of Professor Shou-ping. On page 294, in Treasured Letters by Modern tz'u Poets, Professor Shou-ping annotated this letter. He says, "This should be a letter sent by Pi-cheng to my teacher Yu-sheng from Hong Kong, written on 12 September in the 29th year of the Republic, 1940. It was first mailed to Shanghai and then redirected to Nanking. In the few years before 1940, my teacher undertook part-time jobs wherever they were available in Shanghai to cover the burdensome costs of living. It was most grueling. By spring that year, he was physically exhausted. His old illness recurred and he was in dire situation. Wang Jingwei arrived in Nanking. He asked to see him for old time's sake. Wang said to him, "So much territory of our country has now been lost. In the occupied territories, our countrymen have no one to depend on. Our actions only seek to assist our countrymen and not to appraise our own fallen reputation." Wang invited my teacher, Yu-sheng, to work with him. My teacher thus accepted the appointment of the Japanese puppet government in Nanking. Yet, he was perturbed and very worried. He wrote to Pi-cheng to inform her of the change of a mailing address and told her along the way his awkward situation and thoughts. Hence, she replied with this letter. In this letter, Lü wrote, "If you grant me a letter in return, please send it through Shanghai. It is important." At the time, Shanghai was still under the governance of the concession powers. She did not want to have anything to do with the puppet government in Nanking. On 8th December in the following year, Japan declared war on Britain and America. Shanghai then fell. In my humble studio, there's a piece of calligraphy on a fan leaf by Lü Pi-cheng. She copied a poem, The Hard Road, by Li Bai, 701 to 762 AD. It reads, "Pure wine costs for the golden cup 10,000 coppers a flagon, and a jade plate of dainty food calls for 1,000,000 coins. I fling aside my food sticks and cup. I cannot eat nor drink. I pull out my dagger. I peer 4 ways in vain. I would cross the yellow river, but ice chokes the ferry. I would climb the Taihan mountains, but the sky is blind with snow. I would sit and poise a fishing pole, lazy by a brook. But I suddenly dream of riding a boat, sailing for the sun. Journeying is hard. Journeying is hard. There are many turnings. Which am I to follow? I will mount a long wind someday and break the heavy waves, and set my cloudy sail straight and bridge the deep, deep sea. For the refined rectification of Mr. Wen Gao, 皖南语士吕碧城 Seal impression, 碧城 The above is a translation by Robert Coldwell and Norman L. Smith from the Penguin Book of Chinese Verse, published in 1962. On 13th May 1929, Lü Bicheng gave a speech at the International Conference in Vienna, which was organized by the Internationale Tierschutzkongress. Congress. The title of the speech was "There Should Be No Slaughter." Part of it reads, "The way China protects animals may perhaps be of interest to the world. To trace this belief, it started very early and was formed by 3 sources. The first is Buddhism. The second is Confucianism. The third is the ancient legal system. The aim of Buddhism is to prohibit all killings. The instruction of Confucianism is to refrain from cruelty and killings. There is a saying, having seen them alive, he cannot bear to see them die. Having heard their dying cries, he cannot bear to eat their flesh. As for the ancient legal system, the rules are distributed in the system of rights of the Zhou dynasty nearly 3,000 years ago. There are sayings. The emperor does not kill a cow for no reason. The high official does not kill a sheep for no reason. The commoner does not kill a pig for no reason. They are only killed for sacrifices, banquets, and festivities when there are no other alternative. For daily food, it should be only vegetables, rice, and flour. Since the Great Revolution of China in 1911, reforms and developments have been the main preoccupations. The civilization inherited from ancient China is subsequently nearly wiped out. However, I recently read in a Chinese newspaper that European merchants applied to the Tientsin municipal government for a license to annually export 9 million pounds of beef and 10,000 cows. It was rejected by the government, explaining that cows were used for farming alone in China. They should not be slaughtered. This ancient rule has now been revived. Since we have been discussing in great detail the many ways to protect animals, yet by the end we still accept that they are to be killed, how can we explain this point? Prohibiting the torture of animals is only part of my aspiration. It does not fully realize my belief. No matter how remote is the day of accomplishing my aspiration, even if it takes 1,000 years, I vow to begin this movement today. For humans to kill animals, it is totally based on the strong assaulting the weak. I believe it is a huge disgrace to world civilization. Before President Abraham Lincoln started the war to free the enslaved black people, their status was no better than animals. Those trading enslaved black people did not think their conduct was absurd or wrong. This is exactly similar to our killings of animals now, mistakenly thinking that this is natural. I dare say that world peace will never be kept by international treaties or arrangements. It is maintained by the human heart. This human heart is nurtured by the spirits of justice, righteousness, and compassion. For these spirits, the further away from selfishness, the higher their values. To promote them from humans to animals, their values are even higher. If the primeval character of humans can be dissolved in these spirits, then an aura of peace will fill the earth. This will be the day when world peace truly becomes established. The abstinence from killing animals is not just my personal notion. It represents all the peace lovers and vegetarians of China. Reading this speech 100 years later, it can awaken the astray and heal the deaf. Pi-cheng synthesized knowledge and action to propagate abstinence from killing animals in China and abroad. At that time, not only was there no other Chinese female engaged in this international endeavor, Chinese males also willingly submit to her authority. Her ambition was certainly more than the artistry of tz'u lyrics. For this reason, I used the title Lü Bizhen, Mother of Animal Protection Movement in China. I only wish that this biographical account has not failed to elucidate the ambition and travail of her life.